Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Book of Kings, where we discuss topics such as history, religion, philosophy, culture, and more, and the way that they all interact with each other. Don't forget to like, leave a comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to receive a notification every time I release a new video. Hope you enjoy. All right, everybody, we are back. So what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to kind of break from my usual routine a little bit. So usually, and kind of, intentionally, I kind of try to stay away from current events, and I try to focus on just more general, broad topics, broad concepts, history, religion, culture, philosophy, etc., and try not to get too bogged down by the nitty-gritty of what's going on right now at the current time. But today I'm going to do something a little bit different. What I'm going to talk about today is going to be a little bit topical. It's going to be a little bit about what's going on right now. But I'm going to do it in a way that kind of stays true to what I usually do and relates to these broad concepts, and these broad overarching themes of culture, religion, philosophy, etc., history, all that. So, what I'm going to talk about today is, as we all know, it's 2020 right now, and needless to say, a lot of stuff has gone on this year. That would be the understatement of the century. So right off the get-go, from the beginning of this year, it was just one thing after another, right? There's all these memes, 2020, can it get any worse, right? And then you got a lot of people who are talking about, oh my God, it seems like the world is falling apart. Some say it jokingly, maybe even kind of half joking, half kind of, I don't know, the apocalypse is coming. It's the end of the world, right? So to a lot of us, it may seem like kind of everything that as we know it seems like it's hanging on a loose thread. So on that topic of, the world is ending, the apocalypse is coming, could it get any worse? Everything's falling apart. What do I think about that? Now, obviously, do I think the world is actually ending? Do I think the apocalypse is upon us and these are the end of days? Of course not. If you look through history, this type of stuff is a frequent theme in history. We're constantly seeing the world as people knew it crumbling before their very eyes. So no, I don't think the world is actually ending. But also on the same token, I don't totally reject that idea. And I'm going to tell you why and how I don't reject it. So is the world, the whole world ending? No. Is the world as we know it ending? Possibly. What do I mean by that? The world as we know it. Well, as we've discussed in other videos, every society, every culture, every civilization, etc., at its core has its foundation, a certain ideology, a certain worldview, etc., whatever term you want to use for it, right? And we are no different. And the worldview or the civilization or the ideology that our current society is rested upon is, as we've talked about in my previous video, is the worldview of modernity. So as we've talked about before, what is modernity? Modernity is this worldview, this broad range of ideas which started in the Enlightenment era of philosophy, starting around in the early 1600s and then kind of going about to like the 1700s, etc. The ideology and worldview propagated by people like Francis Bacon, Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Immanuel Kant, Voltaire, Descartes, etc. All these people, all these big names in philosophy, right? So they pretty much laid the foundation for our current world as we know it today, right? And from the worldview that they put forward, we have, a lot of the concepts and institutions which, to this day kind of almost seem like cornerstones of our society. We don't even think twice when we hear these things. We kind of just hear them and we almost take it just if you look up and you see the sky is blue. These things are just there. It's not a shock to hear these concepts. We don't think twice. These are the concepts of rationalism, right? Reason, thinking empirically, looking at your natural environment and trying to come to certain conclusions, having a skeptical mind state and thinking critically, using the scientific method to prove whatever it is that we want to prove, right? Anything that we want to prove has to be proved scientifically, has to be proved empirically. Also connected to and maybe even emerging from these, we have certain concepts, of what a society should be like. We have concepts of liberty, freedom, equality. We have the concept of, a social contract, right? The people and the government should have a contract. It's the government's job to serve the people. And from there we have institutions such as a constitution, right? A written document that says what the leaders can do, what they cannot do. Democracy, right? Rule by the people. People choose their leader. We have the economic system of capitalism. So we have a lot of these core institutions and ideas that form the modern world as we know it. With that being said, why it may seem to some people as if almost half jokingly or not, it seems like the world as we know it is crumbling around us, is because a lot of those institutions, which in our modern society generally, go without question, are almost now being called into question, being challenged, being, in some ways, some could even say being rebuked. So, that is, in essence, what the topic is today. The world as we know it seems like it's falling apart because in some ways, one could maybe argue that the modern world as we know it is falling apart. These core institutions that make our modern world are not being as unquestioned. These things that are our foundation almost seem like they might be losing their foundation. So I'm going to talk about a few ways or few institutions, core institutions, ideas, etc., that may be being challenged, questioned, rebuked, etc. So the first that I'm going to talk about is democracy. So in our modern age, like I said, what's the first thing that you think of in our modern age when we think of what do we stand for, right? What's the foundation of our society? A lot of people, the first thing that would pop into their head might be democracy. And, our modern world is in large part dominated by this, right? The industrialized world are largely composed of democracies. I mean, the most powerful country in the world, the United States, is a democracy. We hold this as almost this core foundation, right? But within our modern age or our current times, we're seeing that foundational concept almost being challenged. So now around the world, we're seeing a lot of countries veer more towards the realm of authoritarianism. And these are countries which, we're not countries that were always authoritarian and dictatorships and monarchies, etc. These are countries that in the past we had all kind of thought of as these core institutional democracies. We wouldn't think twice about thinking of these countries as democracies. Some of them not so much. But we're seeing this being challenged a lot in the world. And we can name countless leaders. We can name Erdogan in Turkey, right? Turkey was always kind of viewed as like the bastion of hope for the Middle East. It was the democracy of the Middle East, right? And then now, a lot of people are kind of view the current president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, as kind of moving in more of an authoritarian direction. He's cracking down on the press. He's dealing forcefully against his opposition. He's banning certain internet websites, Wikipedia, right? So that was one country that we don't even think twice. This is a democracy, and we're seeing this one, in a lot of people's opinion, move into more authoritarian direction. And there's even more examples. Another big example is Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, right? Brazil has always been thought of as a democracy, but now you have this leader who a lot of people are saying he's an authoritarian. He's moving the country, in a direction of more and more authoritarianism, imprisoning political opposition, etc. We can give the example of Philippines. We have Duterte, who a lot of people kind of view as like a strong man. Another example is, of course, Vladimir Putin, right, in Russia. He's viewed very much as an authoritarian. Of course, Russia, it wasn't a very long time that it was what we would consider to be more of a democracy, but nonetheless, a lot of people would say that Putin has moved Russia into that authoritarian direction. Some people would even say Donald Trump in America. Some people would say maybe he's kind of moving it in a little bit more of an authoritarian direction than what we're used to, right? Some people would make that claim. So that is one institution which we've considered unrefutable, right, in our modern day and age, democracy, right? These countries which you've always thought of as democracies, we're seeing that being checked in a lot of these countries where that's always kind of been viewed as the norm. So that's the one area where this concept of modernity that we wouldn't even think twice about, now we're seeing it being challenged. The other area where this institution, which has always been viewed as like this core bedrock of modernity, that's now being challenged or questioned, or some people are even rebuking it, is capitalism. Capitalism has always been the dominant economic system of the modern world, had its basis in the writings of Adam Smith, his idea of the invisible hand of God that will kind of regulate the market, and aside from all the ups and downs that you see in the market, it'll eventually always redirect itself back to where it should be. We're seeing now a lot of people almost challenge it, rebuke it, question it. We're seeing the rise of a lot of political leaders around the world who are moving more in what they would say is a kind of a socialist direction, social democracy direction, democratic socialist direction. Some of the big names that might pop to mind first off is Jeremy Corbyn, Bernie Sanders in the United States. Bernie Sanders is a leader who had no problem calling himself a democratic socialist, when in the past that would have been a huge taboo in the United States. That would have been viewed as almost like a bad word, right? But we're seeing more and more leaders almost embrace this idea and use this term, to varying degrees. We hear certain people call for the whole system of capitalism abolished. A lot of the activist wing in the United States. A lot of people talk about the current coronavirus situation in the United States as almost highlighting what some would view as the breakdown of capitalism. We had a virus, everybody's locked down in their homes, people are being instructed to not work, to quarantine, etc., but people are not being given a safety net in this turbulent time. So a lot of people would say that this is an example of how the up and down fluctuation of capitalism that we think of so much when we think of the stock market, it goes up and it goes down, but it kind of always goes back to where it should be. A lot of people are saying that this shows how maybe capitalism may not be equipped, may not have the tools to deal with a catastrophe such as this, a global pandemic. It may not be able to provide people with that sort of consistency and security that the market would not be able to provide them in a time such as this. So that's another institution that we're seeing challenged. We're seeing a lot of people view as almost kind of viewing that it might not be up to the task of dealing with the current chaotic situation right now. So that's the institution of capitalism. And then another core institution, core idea, or core collection of institutions or ideas per se, are kind of what I'm going to call now sources of intellectual authority. So in our modern time, right, we have certain methods and ways for determining if something is true or not, if something is correct, what people should, ascribe to, etc. Right? We have science, we have the scientific method, we have certain rules of discourse and reason and logic, etc. But now in our modern age, we're seeing kind of a challenge to that per se. So the first I'm going to talk about is the concept of facts. So in our modern age, we hear this term a lot, fact. Oh, that's a fact. How are you going to refute that? That's a fact, right? You're entitled to your opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts, right? Well, in essence, what is a fact? A fact is a widely agreed upon theory or concept or idea or position which is agreed upon by the majority or the vast majority of people who would be considered an expert in that particular area, or a scientist in that area, or somebody who's considered to possess extensive knowledge in that area. And this whole concept of a fact is almost like a bedrock of how we think and how we discuss things in our modern age, right, in our current modern world. But we're seeing challenges to that, right? I would say the most obvious example that people would probably think of is the famous or infamous, whatever you want to call it, phrase from the Trump administration of the alternative facts. A lot of people were outraged by this. What? There's alternative facts? There's different sets of facts, right? In our modern world, that's almost like blasphemy. Like, what? How can you challenge a fact, right? That's almost like our source of revelation, right? That we would view as this is unquestionable. If something's a fact, we view that as that's like the word of God. That's a fact, right? But now we're seeing that whole concept challenged. Well, who's to say what a fact is? Well, maybe there's an alternative fact. Well, maybe the fact is just your opinion or the opinion of people in your school of thought. But we have our own alternative facts. These are different facts, right? And in essence, that's very much contrary, like I said, to modernity, right? To our modern concepts, to our modern way of thinking. That's actually very much a postmodern way of looking at it, right? And postmodernity, as we've talked about in my previous video, postmodernity views it as there's no true objective reality, right? Everybody kind of has their bias. Everybody has their own beliefs that influence them no matter how hard they try to be objective. So postmodernity very much rebukes that idea of, this is a fact, this is objective, etc. And we're seeing this postmodernity now even rising to the level of political discourse, right? The political discourse of the highest elected official in the United States of America, which many would consider the flag bearer of modernity. Another core institution or another core feature of these things which we have in the modern world considered to be sources of intellectual authority would be the concept of statistics, right? Kind of in the same vein, if you want to prove something, you need data, right? You got to always have data. You can't not have data. That's just your opinion. You got to have data. That's anecdotal evidence, right? You can't just go off of anecdotal evidence. You need data. You need statistics. Well, also, we're seeing that being challenged. One of the really dominant worldviews in our modern age today, intersectionality, which many might refer to in common terms as wokeness, openly pushes back or even rejects this whole concept of, no, you got to have statistics, you got to have data, you got to show it with data, right? The ideology of intersectionality relies more on anecdotal evidence rather than what had previously been a reliance on statistical data, etc. Right? You see, people who kind of subscribe to that ideology talking about, we need to listen to the opinions of people. We need to listen to the opinions of what people think and their experiences, right? Per that ideology, usually, they're referring to the experiences of people that they would consider marginalized groups, right? No, we need to listen to the voices of the unheard. We need to listen to the voices of marginalized groups, right? We forget your statistics. We want to hear the voices and the experiences of the marginalized. So that's another challenge or almost rebuke of this institution, which we would consider almost a bedrock of modernity. And that's kind of ties with the first one: facts, data, statistics, etc. And then another, related to this whole topic of sources of intellectual authority that's being challenged in this modern age or in our current times. Like I said, we're talking about sources of authority. We talked about facts, statistics, etc. We're also seeing a challenge of scientific experts, medical experts. Everybody's being quarantined during the coronavirus, and we have different sides that view the quarantines differently. We have some people who are saying, hey, listen, we need to listen to the scientists. We need to listen to the doctors. They're experts in this field. They have knowledge and information that we don't have. So we need to kind of listen to them and follow their expertise because they have more expertise than us. But we also hear another side that's saying, I'm not going to follow them. Who are they to dictate, what we do? Who are they to make decisions that are going to impact our economy and that are going to hurt our economy and make our economy collapse? No, I don't care what the doctors say. They might be lying. How do I know that they're being truthful? How do I know that they're being honest? How do I know that they're not being corrupt? So we're seeing what would previously be considered the unquestioned source of authority in the modern world, what we would consider the facts, the factual evidence, the prescriptions of scientific and medical experts. We're seeing that being challenged. And just like kind of the challenge of the concept of a fact, the challenge of the concept of data and statistics, these same challenges to these institutions for proving something are very postmodern, right? They're very much in opposition to this concept of objectivity, right? I'm not going to believe that these doctors are objective. The doctors aren't objective. They're corrupt. So we're seeing all of the typical sources of intellectual authority in the modern world. We're seeing these very much being challenged in our current times. We're seeing more of almost like a postmodern perspective on these sources of intellectual authority, which we had previously held to in a way where we wouldn't think to question it. Another institution that is widely considered a cornerstone of our modern society that one could possibly view as currently being challenged or threatened or under attack is freedom of speech. So on this topic, we can find examples on both the left and the right in the United States. One example on the right that many people may point to would be the forceful crackdown on the protests that have occurred, or the threats to send the military in response to them. Many people have said that this is a threat to the First Amendment and would clamp down on people's ability to protest. Right? And also to view the other side, the left. A lot of people are saying the left is so obsessed with political correctness. They don't want people to say the wrong thing, to say something that they view as offensive or they view as prejudice, etc. That a lot of people are arguing the left with censorship on various social media platforms, etc. They're saying that, there's a challenge to the concept of free speech. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell, right? We're seeing all these core institutions that have been bedrocks of the modern world, right? Democracy, capitalism, right? The concept of fact, data, statistics, following the medical experts, the scientific experts, free speech, etc. We're seeing that a lot of these, like I said, are being called into question or even rebuked or challenged. And not to say that these haven't been challenged before current times right now, but we're seeing them all being challenged all concurrently. And it may lead one to believe that the modern world is in decline. The foundation is almost crumbling from within. So, yeah, that's pretty much my position on all this in a nutshell. So do I think the modern world is collapsing? I don't know. It's hard to say. Time will only tell. It is true that there has been times in the past when, all of these core institutions that we view as bedrocks of the modern world have been challenged, and the modern social system as we know it has bounced back, right? We had the Great Depression where people thought, capitalism is done, it's collapsing, right? And, it did bounce back with the reforms of FDR, the New Deal, which some would say would be saving capitalism through incorporating a little bit of socialism. And we did see World War II, where we saw the rise of various different other ideologies which challenged modernity. We saw, obviously, the Soviet Union, which was communist, Marxist. We even saw Nazi Germany. We saw the rise of fascism, which some people have even argued, and it sounds strange, that fascism could be related to postmodernism, as Hitler is stated to have been heavily influenced by Nietzsche and in fact publicly paid homage to him. And additionally, existentialist philosopher Martin Heidegger was an active member of the Nazi Party. But that's another topic for another day. So back to the main topic. During World War II, we saw modernity challenged by Marxism. And if somebody would subscribe to the opinion that fascism is related to postmodernism, we could see that it was challenged by a certain form of postmodernism. And obviously, we all know the result of that. The Allies were successful, US, England, etc. were successful, and fascism was defeated. So, we saw the modern world kind of rebounded from that. And then, of course, after we had the Cold War, where it was modernity, democracy, capitalism, etc., butting heads with Marxism, and eventually modernity, capitalism, etc., did emerge victorious in that instance as well. So there could be a lot of credence to the argument that, hey, modernity has hit low points before, it's faced challenges before, and it's bounced back. So maybe somebody would argue, hey, it's going to bounce back again. There's definitely arguments to be made on both sides. As far as what I personally believe, like I said, I don't know. So I just gave my take on which institutions of modernity I believe to be currently being challenged. So back to the question of this topic, I'll leave that up to you, all you listeners, to judge for yourself. Do you think we're in the latter days of modernity and modernity is being chipped away before our very eyes? Or will modernity bounce back like it bounced back from the Great Depression and from World War II, etc.? So yeah, I'll leave that up to all of you to form your opinions on that. And feel free, if you have any strong opinions on this issue, feel free to leave those opinions in the comment section. I definitely always appreciate dialogue and discourse and kind of everybody just giving their opinion. And I feel like that's helpful. We can all just hash it out, exchange ideas. So yeah, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comment section. that was my video on this topic for today, and hope you enjoyed it. Have a nice day. Thank you for watching. This has been another Book of Kings video. Don't forget to like, leave a comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to receive a notification every time I release a new video.